Welcome to the Rebirth Summit 2025, Stories of Unyielding Courage. I'm Dr. David Shapiro. I was born in New York to an Orthodox Jewish family. I walked through atheism, fought professionally in a ring, joined the military, and eventually found truth and healing in Jesus. Today, as a pastor and apologist, I write and speak to help people see the faith and logic go hand in hand. Through my podcast, The Boundless Bible, and my upcoming book, Jesus Christ, A Lot of Evidence, I share historical, scientific, and archaeological evidence that points to the truth of the scripture. My passion is helping believers grow confident in God's word and inviting skeptics to explore with fresh eyes. You can find me on drdavidshapiro.org. But it is my privilege to actually introduce our speaker, Philip Wooldridge. Philip is a visionary entrepreneur, speaker, author, and financial strategist with over 25 years of experience in banking, lending, real estate investing, and corporate leadership. As the founder of Main Street Advisory, LLC, Philip equips business owners and professionals with tools they need to build financial resilience through strategic business credit coaching, alternative lending solutions, a dynamic speaker and managing director of Philip Speaks, LLC. He inspires audience with transformative insights on perseverance, leadership, and overcoming limited beliefs. Philip's personal journey from navigating systematic challenges to achieving financial freedom serves as a powerful foundation for his consulting, speaking, and mentoring work. He's a contributing author of the acclaimed Triumph in the Trenches, which highlights real stories of courage, strategy, and triumph against all odds. Featured in Frontrunner New Jersey and on PBS and across various platforms, Philip is a respected voice in financial empowerment and entrepreneurial leadership. A real estate investor, trusted advisor, and community advocate, Philip is on a mission to help others create profitable, purpose-driven lives and businesses. He believes true success begins within, and through strategic faith and action, anybody can rise. I love that. Anybody can rise. And let's start with your story, sir. Let's begin from the very beginning. What was life like before your transformation?
Thank you so much, David. Before I get started, I got to say this. I lost my sister back in April, and I've listened to all these incredible stories. My mother's first name was Ruth, and as we get started here, right in the center of my screen is someone named Ruth. So this is really incredible. So, like a lot of the speakers, my transformation has been a journey. So there have been a number of things that have taken place over time. So when you ask that question, a few things kind of come to mind really immediately. One is, as a young kid, I remember being homeless and being evicted on a number of occasions. And one of the most embarrassing experiences for me was probably maybe 8, 9 years old, being just a step ahead of the landlord on an eviction and, all of our stuff sitting out on the sidewalk. And I remember saying to my mother that, when I grow up, I'm going to own so many houses, I'm never going to have to worry about being homeless. And so that started my journey in terms of my thinking about what the possibilities might be for me, in the future. And then I recall listening and hearing my mother pray in the room adjacent to mine. There was no food in the refrigerator. And I hear my mother praying for God to bring us food. And I think maybe 30, 40 minutes later, there's a knock at the door, and it's the Italian American Sportsman's Club, the chef from the Italian American Sportsman Club. This guy brought pots that were bigger pots than I had ever seen in my life. Spaghetti, pencil points, veal parmesan, chicken parmesan, meatballs and spaghetti, you name it. And so my mother sent myself and my sister, the one who just passed in April, to the store to get these big pans so that we could share some of that with the neighbors, because it was certainly more than we needed. So we basically take these big pots and these big pans of all the different things to the various neighbors. And what that brought to mind for me, I hear so many people sometimes saying that they're self-made, and I'm proud of the fact that I'm community-made. You know what? We grew up around a lot of people that looked out for us, and we looked out for them, and so that's sort of my I guess my foundation. And then later, I got married around when I was 30 years old. And I remember my wife and I taking a ride, decided we were going to go and see my dad. And my mom always knew roughly where my dad was. So over the years, when we were smaller, she'd put us on the bus to go visit him. You know, he had a problem with alcohol, and you know, she got fed up with that. Eventually, they separated. On this one occasion, we're out, and it gets really dark, and we're on our way back home. Wasn't able to locate him. Had visited one of my aunts and one of my uncles, and on the way back, we're traveling down this really dark road, and I see two figures on the side of the road. And as we pass them, I say to my wife, one of those guys was my dad. So we turn around, we go back, and sure enough, it's my dad. We chat for a few minutes, and then we start on our way. And we get maybe half mile down the road, and my wife, who's a registered nurse, says to me, you know, your dad didn't look that good, and if he doesn't come home with us, this may be the last time we see him alive. And so we go back, we pick my dad up, we asked him, I said, Dad, you want to come home with us? He says, yes. He jumps in the car, and we take him home. And I share that story because that really taught me something very important about the idea of forgiveness and redemption. Because my dad turned out to be a much better grandfather than he was a father. But he would have never had that opportunity had we not had the opportunity for him to stay with us for a couple of years until he got back on his feet. We got an apartment for him, and he lived probably, I don't know, maybe 15 years or so in a state of sobriety and good health. And my daughters and my nieces and nephews have much fonder memories than my siblings and I, especially when he was drinking.
I love it. I love the concept of community made. That's something that I might steal from you at some point. I absolutely love it. It's such a great concept. Let me ask you, in your own story, what was your breaking or turning point?
Well, interestingly enough, I started my career in banking back in 1979. I started out as a teller, worked my way up. And by the time I got to be a sales manager, the bank was acquired. It was a fairly small bank by today's standards, probably about 85 or so branches. And I happened to be in the top 3 of salespeople. Every month, there were 3 of us. One of us was first, one of us was second, one of us was third. So we traded those spots monthly. A bank that came in and acquired us decided they were getting rid of the commission structure. And so for those of us who were top salespeople, that meant we were taking a pay cut. So they invited us to the executive dining room to take us to lunch, to tell us how great they were. And of course, when it got around to me, I wanted to know, as a top producer, was my base pay going to go up to compensate for the loss in commissions? And of course, you could hear a pin drop in the room. Everyone else was talking about, how great this new company was. I was more interested in, what's going to happen with my money. And the guy said to me, he was the executive vice president, going to be in charge of all these branches across their footprint. And he said to me, he didn't know, and I grew up in a rough part of town, and you tend to get a fairly good view of people, and whether or not they're honorable, dishonorable, trustworthy. And I basically decided in that moment he was a liar, and I had no intention of working for him. So within 30 days of that, I found myself another job. And what that created for me was, I decided that from a corporate standpoint, no one was going to have that kind of control over me and my finances. And I wrote a resignation letter. And for about 25 years in my banking career, there was always a resignation letter in my briefcase. And that empowered me to be very deliberate and very intentional about creating my own income outside of my job. And that has really produced really good results for me. And if you fast forward to September 11th, 2001 as an example, I was at that time vice president and fair lending manager responsible for fair lending compliance for the 7-state market area that we covered. And I decided, I had been at a fair lending conference. I was in Pentagon City, right across from the Pentagon on that day. And so our hotel became a command center, and I got to witness firsthand a lot of the activity that was going on in Washington as it related to protect the country. I decided in that moment that my corporate climb was a lot less important, and I wanted to spend more time with my family. And I ultimately ended up spending 5 years at home, golfing, camping, traveling, and enjoying my family. And that was the result of those years of creating an income outside of my corporate paycheck. And so a lot of people were a little perplexed and puzzled when I resigned, because their attitude was, nobody leaves those jobs. You get into the 6-figure territory and stock options and bonuses and all of what we consider the good job, right? And people die out of those jobs. They don't reside. So but I put a lot of time, energy, and effort in growing my own revenue outside of the job, and that allowed me to be able to do that.
So let me ask you, just to go from somebody who doesn't know where you're going to live, doesn't know where your next meal is coming from, really, hearing your mom praying yourself that, you will never have to feel this for the rest of your life. And then you transform to, having the ability and power to resign from a 6-figure job. What did that transformation feel like for you?
Well, it was awesome, because it was something I worked toward, but I didn't really think about it a whole lot once I set it in motion. I know I had a supervisor once who would come into my office, and he said to me, Phil, you're the only one on the team who doesn't have any personal things in the office. There's no pictures of your family, there are no flowers, no plants. And I don't know, maybe a month or so after that, we happened to be in his office overlooking the parking lot. And one of the divisions was shut down that day. It came in on a Friday morning around 9 o'clock and told about 50 people their division was non-existent, and they had till 4 o'clock to pack up their desk and pack up and vacate the premises and take their severance packages and go on their way. Some of those folks were still going back and forth to the parking lot with their boxes, like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And I said to my boss at the time, I said, Jack, I have a briefcase leaning up against the wall in my office. The day you come in and tell me our division is shut down, I'll be out of here in 3 minutes. I got nothing to pack.
Wow. So it's funny, because it sounds like this would be a great thing, but it probably comes from your experience as a kid, not knowing where you're going to be. It's something where you look back and you go, man, that's really hard. It's hard to live where all you have is a briefcase and you can leave in 3 minutes. Where are you now on your journey?
Well, where I am now on my journey is interesting. During the 5 years I was at home, I remember must have been probably 2007, maybe early 2008. I think we had just gotten back maybe a week or so prior from Disney World. And, my daughters were taking golf lessons. I think we had just gotten back from golf, and we were at home about to have some lunch. And my youngest daughter was in the family room and looking out in the backyard. She had her hands clasped behind her head, her feet up in the recliner. And I hear her talking to herself, and she says, "This is the life." So I go into the family room and I said, "Vanessa, what did you say?" She said, "This is the life. Traveling, golfing, swimming with the dolphins, this is the life," right? So I say to myself that's my purpose, right? That's what I'm supposed to be doing. What I'm supposed to be doing is helping other families get into a financial place where their children and their families have that is the life experience. And so that's pretty much what I do now. A friend of mine asked me a couple of years ago when I was going to retire. I'm 66 years old now, and I said to him that, my job and my purpose from 66 to 96 is to help other people achieve what they can achieve. So as a speaker, my tagline is be unstoppable. So as a speaker, I talk about that. As a coach, I share that as a mindset for people. As an author, I write about it. And as an alternative lender, I help facilitate funding for folks to help them build and grow and their businesses and build sustainable revenue streams so that they can get to that. This is the life.
Wow. So from the ghetto to golf, your community made. What message would you have for somebody who they're stuck? They are in a position that you were as a child, or they're an adult with children, and they just want to feed their children.
Right.
What message do you have for somebody who's just stuck in that moment?
The message I have is really very simple, and it is that you can't live your life based on your current situation and circumstance. If it's not a situation and circumstance that you want, you have to set your sights on your possibilities. When I was about 12 years old, after my mom and dad separated, we were on welfare for a time. And I remember coming home from school one day, and my mother said that our caseworker wanted to see me. I get down to the welfare office. There are a couple of police officers there, controlling the crowd. There's a bunch of people screaming and yelling about, they hadn't received their money, they hadn't received their food stamps. I go in to see the caseworker, and I assume I was there because of, my upbringing, where I lived, the whole 9 yards. I was an at-risk youth. But the conversation with the caseworker didn't feel like a loving, caring relationship or conversation. It really felt more like an interrogation. And so I said to her when she asked, what my plans were, I said, I have no idea what my plans are, where I'm going to be in life, where I'm going to go in life, what I'm going to do in life. But this is one thing I can tell you for sure. You can remove my name from your list because I'm never coming back here. Wow. And she did that and reduced my mother's check. So I shined shoes, delivered newspapers, ran errands, cleaned up people's yards, and made money to buy my school clothes. And I never looked back. So I would say to people, think about your possibilities instead of your circumstance, and decide to be unstoppable. It's a decision.
Philip, one more question, just because I'm curious, actually, if you saw your younger self, if you saw yourself in that room hungry and did not realize just how much potential you had yet, what would you share with yourself? What wisdom would you share with your very younger self?
What I would share with my younger self, looking back now, I'd probably say, Mom, you were right. I could do anything.
I love that. I am so sorry to hear about your sister. I am sure that she is absolutely proud of the man that you have become. Just very strong, and anybody who says mom is right is a pretty strong guy. Community made, and I absolutely love it. Thank you, Philip. Thank you for sharing your heart and your powerful story. You really are just a beacon of hope for anybody who's in a situation. I actually grew up fairly poor myself. So this actually hits home for me quite a bit. I grew up in New York, in a poor neighborhood, and had moments like that as well. This has just been an incredible conversation for the Rebirth Summit 2025. Definitely a story of unyielding courage. David, it's been an honor to host this interview as part of the global movement for healing and transformation. Stay tuned for more interviews for courageous speakers all around the world. Until next time, this is Rebirth TV signing off.